Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Leighanne and I talk about books. So today we are doing September's wrap up. In the month of September, first of all, I am like, your girl, she's back, okay? She is back. She read 11 books this month. Who is she? I don't know. And I did my spreadsheet, so I have all the stats for you guys. Look at me go. I'm so proud. Okay, so 11 books that I read this month. Breaking down star ratings, I had 1 5-star, 4 4-star, 4 3-star, and 2 2-star books. So pretty good mixture there. In terms of genre, I read 3 nonfiction, 4 horror, and then 4 thrillers. Formatting, 5 physical books, 4 ebooks, 2 audiobooks. Comes to a total of 3,441 pages. 11 books total, I already said that. And then my male to female author ratio is actually really sad. And I read 10 male authors and 1 female author, so your girl needs to do better about that. But obviously for the month of September, this is actually the second best reading month that I have had the entire year, because I kind of lost my mind in February. I say lost my mind in February, I didn't lose my mind, but I lost my mojo in February and then really just started coming back to it. It's because it's spooky season, maybe, I don't know. There are a couple of books in this particular wrap up that I'm gonna kind of skim over for reasons that I'll talk about when I get there. So first book that I read, I got in the mood for true crime because I was reading thrillers at the end of September. This is September, I'm at the end of August, whoops. At the end of August I was reading thrillers, so I got in the mood for some true crime and I decided to pick up The Monster of Florence. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with this is a true crime. I gave it 3 stars and it is about the Monster of Florence, who was a serial killer that was active in Italy in the 70s and 80s, I believe. And basically, apparently in Italy during that time period, everybody lived at home. When younger people, they lived at home, and so they couldn't have sex at their own house, so they had to park their car and have sex in their car, which just sounds really uncomfortable. But that was the thing that happened, and so this particular serial killer would target people who were doing it in the car and shoot them. I want to say he killed 14 people. I was very unfamiliar with this particular case, but it basically brings you through the crimes themselves. There were several people that were arrested during the investigation that lasted many years, but every time they thought that they caught the person, another set of murders would happen. And so, you know, to this day, this particular killer has never been caught. I did find parts of it to be a little dry. I did find parts of it that I didn't care all that much about it, to be completely honest. One of the things that was really fascinating to me, and this is one of the reasons that these are books that I will talk about a little bit later, the Hannibal Lecter series, actually. Thomas Harris actually sat in on some of the court proceedings for someone who was arrested for these crimes and kind of worked that into Hannibal. And I thought that was actually really interesting. And knowing that is actually what prompted me to want to reread that. That plus I was watching the series, but we'll get to that later in this video. So yeah, 3 stars. It was pretty interesting, especially if you enjoy learning about serial killers. I wasn't very familiar with this one, so it was good information. Next, I picked up Rosemary's Baby. This is a classic horror novel. Most people know it from the film. However, I have never seen the film. I very much enjoyed this. I think I gave it 4 stars. There were a couple things about it that I didn't really love, and I think that just has to do with the era in which it was written, which is, you know, kind of a cop-out. However, there is one particular scene in the book where Rosemary and her husband, they are trying to conceive a child, and she has one too many drinks, and she wakes up the next morning and she's like, why do I feel like absolute trash? And then come to find out she's pregnant because her husband was like, oh yeah, well, you know, you were asleep and I thought that it would be, you know, cool to do it while you were asleep. And it's just like, what? That, okay. Which that plays, you know, later into the story or whatever, but it was just like, oh my God. I loved the progression of the story. I really liked the characters that were in it. I liked the back and forth. Is Rosemary crazy? Is she not? Is there something else that's actually going on? I did very much enjoy all of those aspects of it. So classic horror. If you haven't read it and you like horror, I would definitely recommend it. Next, once again, I'm still really into true crime, so I picked up Black Dahlia, Red Rose. This is another true crime and murder case that I was not really familiar with. I knew of it, but didn't really know anything about it. So it was definitely very informative. And it was also very interesting because if you are unfamiliar with this particular case, and I don't know why you wouldn't be because most people are, but this particular case was in Los Angeles. I don't remember the years because I'm the worst. But it was a young woman. She was found pretty much sawed in half. They never found out who did it. It was kind of like very much like a modern day like Jack the Ripper almost. But this particular book takes you through the investigation and how a lot of it felt like one big cover-up. It was actually really fascinating to see just how many times they dropped the ball, how much the press knew versus the actual police officers. It was very, very interesting. There were definitely parts where it dragged on a little bit, but for the most part, I found it to be informative and enjoyable to listen to. I listened to most of my nonfiction via audio because there's just something about it that I retain it better. So I did listen to this from audio from my library, but if you're into true crime, haven't listened to that, I recommend. Next I read I Am Providence by Nick Mamatas. I gave this 2 stars. I'm not gonna talk about it because you're gonna see it in another video later. No, there's a lot of things that I found wrong with that one. Again, not gonna talk about it because you guys will get the full gist in some vlog clips on that. So next I read the Rest Maidens by Gwendolyn Kiste. This book I gave like 3.5, 4 stars for, I'm pretty sure that's what I gave it. I really liked this. I love female written horror. It's really great. But this particular story follows a neighborhood. You have your main characters, but it centers around a neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio, and everybody in this neighborhood, all the fathers work for a factory. And one day, several of the girls from the neighborhood, for some weird reason, start turning into what later becomes known as the Rest Maidens. They never really figure out what happens, why it happens to them, what happens to them after the fact. But the main character of our story, her cousin and her best friend, who are trying desperately to get out of that particular neighborhood, you know, was one of the Rest Maidens. She moves away and then later comes back as the phenomenon starts to happen again. I really enjoyed this book for a couple of different reasons. I really liked the way that she wrote the setting. You know, the setting plays very heavily into the story itself. It really sets the tone for the rot and decay of the family unit, the factory that they're in, you know, everything. And I thought that she just did that really well. There was a little bit of pacing, I don't want to say issues, but the pacing could have been done just a tiny bit better, but overall it was a story that I really enjoyed, so I would recommend it. So recently I had decided to rewatch the television series Hannibal with Mads Mikkelsen and Hugh Dancy, Lawrence Fishburne, and a couple of other people. I really love that series so much. I think for it being on network television, like they did the damn thing. I haven't finished the 3rd season yet, full disclosure, because I've been told that the 3rd season isn't all that great. I'm like halfway through it right now. But after reading Monster of Florence and having watched that, I was like, I really want to reread this series. And I say reread the series, but I only ever read Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs. So I picked up Red Dragon, gave it 4 stars. I really love this story, and I was really shocked to see just how closely the television series stayed to the book. Obviously, this is our introduction to the infamous character that is Hannibal Lecter, but I did enjoy the fact that the story doesn't so much center around him. That was really just kind of our introduction to him, and then our introduction to Will Graham. Overall, I just thought that it was really well done. It was really fast-paced. Definitely one of my favorite like serial killer thrillers that I've ever read. So from there, I immediately went ahead and started Silence of the Lambs. Most people have seen the film. Excellent, excellent film. I really enjoy the book. I give the book 5 stars. In this book, we get much more time with Hannibal Lecter himself. You know, he becomes this like mysterious character. We don't really know a lot about him. We don't really know why he does what he does. He's somebody that has this incredibly refined taste, and then of course has a taste for flesh. He's somebody who understands the human psyche very well, and we see that over and over again through his interactions with Clarice and, you know, his interactions with Crawford and whose name I can't remember. What is that dude's name? Chilton, the ward psychiatrist, or, you know, the warden Chilton. And that is all just like, I absolutely love his character. I love the way that everything plays out with Buffalo Bill, and really just how, you know, Harris brings you through the story. So from there, I went ahead and read Hannibal, which I had not read previous to this. And I gave that one 3 stars. This is where Harris really brought the whole monster of Florence thing into the story. We know at the end of Silence of the Lambs that Hannibal escapes, and we don't know what happens to him. This story picks up several years later. Hannibal has been gone for several years. Clarice has grown up. She has, you know, been in the FBI. She has had a pretty decent career, you know, with the exception of a couple of, you know, dark spots on her record. In this book, Harris tries to get us to understand Hannibal a little bit more. He really tries to give him a little bit more of a backstory. He tried to make him less mysterious, and he tried to, you know, talk about the memory palace and maybe why he is the way that he is, and I just don't feel like that was very successful. And so, like, I feel like he didn't ruin Hannibal as a character for me, but I didn't love him as much after this. I do have every intention of reading Hannibal Rising, despite the fact that I have been told that it's not very good, but I do want to read it. So I hope that it doesn't ruin the character for me, but if it does, it is what it is. The next book that I ended up finishing was Danse Macabre from Mr. King. It is his nonfiction. I am not gonna talk in depth about that. It was interesting for a couple of different reasons. You know, it really talks about horror in general, not just necessarily about, you know, his work and how he writes. That I will let you guys know is not going to get its own episode of the King Chronicles. I'm going to be skipping over nonfiction. I just don't feel like I have that much to talk about, not being a writer, but I just wanted to read it for like my general information to see if there was, you know, like any anecdotal information. I listened to that on audio as well, though I do own a mass market copy, which is somewhere in the guest room. So this is another book that I'm not going to talk too much about, and that is The Fury by John Farris. This is a classic horror novel. I also gave this 2 stars. I didn't love it. There were parts of it where I was like, I do not care about anything that is happening. It took me a long time to get through it. Again, not going to talk about it because you'll see it in another video. And the last book that I read was The Chestnut Man. This is book of the month edition, and I hadn't seen that much about it yet, but again, like, as you can see, thrillers, horror, like, I'm real into it right now. And this is being a pretty thick book. I had put a request for my library for the audio on this, like right after I got it in. And it came through pretty quickly. So I was like, oh, well, shit, I've got this audio, so I need to go ahead and start it. I was pleasantly surprised by this because I have read some thrillers that I've gotten from Book of the Month where it was like, ugh, not so much. I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving this 4 stars. There were really only a couple things about it that I didn't love. So the story itself, I will let you know, it's pretty gruesome. It's obviously about a serial killer. And it deals a lot with child abuse, but it's called The Chestnut Man because you have this serial killer that's going through and he's killing women, and he always leaves this little signature Chestnut Man at the crime scene. And so you have a murder squad in Copenhagen that is, you know, trying to catch this person. So as I said, it is pretty gruesome. It reads like you're watching a crime drama, but it's not like you're reading a screenplay. It is very detailed. I found it to be really fast-paced. I found it to be really engaging. There were some things that I didn't love, and the thing that I didn't love is our main character is a male detective, and boy oh boy can you tell, okay? Because there were moments where he would say like these really fucking sexist things, and it's just like, can we not? Like, that doesn't add anything to the story whatsoever. It does not further the plot. It doesn't do anything but serve to be gross. And I don't think that it was meant to be part of that particular character's, like, characterization. It was just one of those things where it's like, if you had left it out, you would have been good. But there is a lot of sexism, a lot of like really gross feelings towards women from various male characters within this book, and that was the biggest problem that I had, which is one of the reasons that I took off that star rating. However, aside from that, like I said, it was really interesting. It was really fast paced. I will say that I didn't quite see the resolution coming. You know, like once we, you know, the big reveal happens, I didn't quite see that person being the person, and so he got me there, and I appreciate that. And the other thing that I did enjoy was that we did leave it open to potentially create a series or like a carry-on, and I did like that because I feel like this has a lot of potential. I really enjoyed it. This is probably one of my favorite thrillers that I've read this year, actually. And for being as thick as it is, it didn't feel like it dragged at any point. So the pacing was really spot on as well. All right, so those are the books that I read in September. Pretty successful reading month for me, as I previously said. So I'm pretty excited about that. I really feel like I'm back. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, so that's, you know, pretty much all I have for you guys today. Have you read any of these books? If you have, comment down below. Let me know what you thought of them. You know, as always, please do keep it spoiler free in this particular video, as you know, we don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read these books. However, if you do want to talk spoilers, you can contact me on Twitter, Goodreads, or Instagram. All of those links can be found in the down bar below. As always, if you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure you click thumbs up or hit subscribe if you haven't already. You can also click the little bell to be notified of any videos that I upload. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.